All right. Good evening, all. Today, we have an awesome opportunity to hear two speakers. First, we'll have Jennifer Burst. She is a board certified assistant behavior analyst with just over 4 years of experience working with children with autism and other disabilities. Jennifer specializes in working with children in ASD and deafness. She graduated with her bachelor's in applied behavioral analysis, and is working towards her master's degree. She will graduate next August. She has a crisis prevention training and focuses on trauma-informed care for her clients. And then after Jenny's presentation, we'll have Justine Westerfeld. She is a qualified autism specialist with over 5 years of experience working in a clinical setting in applied behavior analysis. She specialized in trauma-informed care and personnel training management. Justine has dedicated her career to supporting children with behavioral issues, including ASD, IED, ADHD, and PTSD, helping them develop essential skills and improve their quality of life. Justine holds a BA in psychology with minors in business and sociology and is a board certified QASP-S. She is set to graduate with her MA in behavior analysis in December. Beyond her professional endeavors, Justine is a foster mom, she's working to help sibling groups attain services and return to their biological parents. Justine's passion for her work and unique personal journey makes her a dedicated and compassionate professional in applied behavior analysis. Thank you both.
All right, Miss Jenny Burst is going to be the first speaker. Go ahead. Thank you so much.
Jenny, are you able to share your screen?
I think Justine's working on it. Give her just a
Oh,
sec.
okay. No
Sorry.
problem. Yes, no problem. Thank you.
There we go. Hello, everyone. I am Jenny, and I am the BC ABA that will be talking to you guys tonight. We're going to be talking about autism. So here we go. So first off, we're going to talk about some statistics of autism. 1 in 36 children are, sorry, something popped up, affected by autism. So meaning 1 in 36 children will get an autism diagnosis. This diagnosis is typically given around the age of 4 to 5. And most kids start getting their services by the age of 4 to 4.5. A lot of kiddos, 83%, will typically get services, whether that be special education services, early interventions, services, or additional therapies for their kiddos with autism. And it is shown to improve those kiddos' skills of communication, social skills to up to 50%. So what is autism? Autism is a developmental condition that affects how people communicate, interact, and process information as it comes in and as they provide that information. So a lot of people with autism will display social skills that are not typical to other individuals. They have social challenges. You'll also see some repetitive behaviors, fixated interests, meaning they are going to be focused on one thing that's really all they really want to talk about or discuss. And then that also kind of goes into the social skills aspect of they're not able to communicate effectively with others, explaining like, if I want to talk about one thing, they're just going to want to talk about that one specific interest. So that kind of overlaps there. A lot of friends with autism, they have extremely special strengths that come with schooling, communication, understanding information, but they also have those differences as well. Autism is a spectrum. So you will see some people with autism are very able to communicate effectively. They can use full sentences. Other people cannot communicate as effectively. They're not going to be able to have those social interactions like we typically would. And the severity of their symptoms is a very big range. So that's kind of why we call it a spectrum. There are 3 different levels of autism. So the first level requires some support, meaning they are able to function independently as an individual. They can, when they grow up, they'll be able to live on their own, have their job, do great. They will be able to function independently without having the care of a person there. The next level is they will require substantial support, meaning they will need some support from individuals that are there. This is more noticeable. Sorry, here we go. This would be more like somebody who is able to speak in simple sentences, request simple things that they're needing, but has limited interaction skills with others, like beyond their safe space, if we can say. The third level requires very substantial support, meaning they will need support their entire life from either a parent, a nurse, anything kind of like that. They will have limited speech and very difficult social interactions. All right, so now let's go over some indicators for autism. Well, this will typically, what we'll see right here is typically more for children. So they won't turn, if you call their name, they will not turn or respond to their name. A lot of them will not respond to loud noises. They're kind of just in their own little bubble. They can't, or they have very big difficulties imitating different actions, facial expressions, movements, vocalizations. After the age of 3, so under the age of 3, it is typical for children to reverse pronouns, like call their dad a she or mom a he. That's typical. Growing up past the age of 3, that's not as typical. So if you see that, then that could be another indicator. Limited eye contact. A lot of friends with autism tend to avoid eye contact. It makes them very uncomfortable. They don't like it. So they'll avoid that. Unusual reactions to the environment. So this one would be they are really, really wanting different sensory input, meaning they want really big bear hugs, deep compression. They want to play with different things. They're scared of different things. That could include like loud noises. Some friends are sensitive to loud noises, others prefer loud noises. It's just those different reactions to what we would typically see in a child. Difficulty engaging with peers. They'll want to be more playing by themselves, not really engaging with others. Resisting change to routines as well. So if they have a set routine and then something kind of deviates, that's going to cause some suspicion that they may have autism. And they're not hitting their developmental milestones as they should. So these are indicators. This does not 100% mean somebody does have autism. If you have suspicions, please reach out to pediatricians, doctors, and they will give you some more information on that. Now we're going to turn it over to Justine, and she will give you some more information.
All right. So what should you do if you think your child may have autism? So for most parents, it's a question of, what is the first step? How do I get going? What do I need to do? So the autism diagnosis is done through a combination of assessments and evaluations. Typically, parents are going to start with a standard well child checkup with a pediatrician. So you'll start with your primary care doctor, and it involves short tests to identify if they're showing any signs of developmental delays. If the pediatrician is agreeing, yes, maybe there's something here that we should dive a little deeper into, they'll probably do a referral to a developmental psychologist who would do more comprehensive diagnostic evaluations. Those screenings are going to be a combination of questions asked to you as parents. They're going to be questions about when a child started developing and at what age, when you started seeing things that you thought were atypical. And so it's really important as a parent, if you're starting to see things, write it down. Keep a journal of something that you can refer back to. So if you are sitting in these, you'll be able to pull up those dates and be like, well, I started seeing it here and I thought it was really odd, but I didn't do anything with it just yet. Those things will come back in some of these assessments that they do. And they're really trying to narrow down whether or not there's another medical cause for the things that you're seeing, or if it is potentially autism. Um, in these evaluations, they're going to see if there are any indications of potential concern. It They conduct them typically with a team of specialists. So you're going to have psychologists, neurologists, speech therapists, et cetera, that are all looking at your child and seeing if they're seeing what you're seeing. They're going to do behavioral assessments. These assessments look at a child's behavior, their communication, and their social interactions. They use tools like the Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule, which is normally just referred to as the ADOS. And they also use the Autism Diagnostic Interview as their common tools that they're going to use. The ADOS is both like actual like evaluation that they do with the child, where they're having them perform tasks and looking at what they do and how they react. Whereas the autism diagnostic interview is really just them talking to you as parents and getting that background information so that they can move forward. Um, if they think that there's a possibility of any other medical issue that could be causing some of these symptoms, they're going to send you for additional medical evaluations to rule those out. After they review the developmental history and these assessments that they've done, they're going to basically look at the criteria that's listed in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, which you guys have probably heard called the DSM-5. It is the handbook that basically lays out the criteria that someone must meet in order to be actually officially diagnosed with autism. For ASD specifically, the child must show persistent deficits in both social communication and interactions, as well as restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior in order to qualify. Basically, by going through this comprehensive approach, it ensures that the diagnosis is accurate and that the child receives the appropriate support and interventions. So I'm going to kind of stop it there for just a second. I want to make sure that you guys don't have any questions now that we've kind of run through some of the technical side of what autism is and kind of how the diagnosis is made. I feel like it just gets really technical, and I know sometimes it's easier to ask questions if you have them. Does anyone have a question they would like answered? I am not seeing anything at this point, so I'm going to keep going then. Feel free to put your questions in the chat box, and as we find a good place to answer them, we'd be happy to do so as well. So how does autism affect behavior? Well, there's some pretty significant ways that it can affect behavior. Some of them are nuanced and very slight. Others, you're going to see them and you're going to be like, what the heck? So for autism specifically, some of the biggest things you're going to see are deficits or differences in social interactions and communication. With social interactions specifically, individuals or children with autism really struggle to understand both nonverbal and verbal cues. So this could be that they don't read body language. They don't see when you want to end a conversation or when you want to start a conversation. Um, they will consistently struggle to understand when a conversation is kind of lacking and when they need to fill in and add additional information to keep a conversation going. They can either make too much eye contact with you or too little eye contact with you. It depends on the individual. Sometimes you'll feel like they're, staring into your soul and you're like, what's going on? This isn't an intense conversation. And then other times you'll be like, are they paying attention to me? I can't really tell. It really just depends on the individual and how they do with eye contact, but typically you're going to see some type of um, unusual eye contact that they make with those social interactions, making it harder for them to form relationships. If we can't communicate, non-verbally, and then for the second point, if we can't communicate verbally, we're going to have trouble establishing and forming those relationships. So then second big piece of what you're going to see when it comes to behaviors is communication. There really is a wide spectrum of how communication looks with each individual with autism. Some individuals have so much speech, they are, so articulate that you may not even guess that there's any issue that they have with communication. On the other end of the spectrum, you're going to run into some individuals who quite literally don't speak, or they use assisted communication devices, which look like iPads these days, that have buttons that allow them to speak through a computer because they don't vocally speak. A lot of individuals lie somewhere in the middle where they have some speech but not a lot, or they may repeat words or phrases. Um, a lot of autistic children, especially, really like to quote movie lines or things that they've heard. And so you may hear them say things over and over again, or it doesn't really fit in a conversation because they're really just paraphrasing something that they've heard somewhere else. Um, but when we look at the communication, it is definitely a big part of why social interactions are also a struggle for autistic children. And forming those social connections are a big part of how children form the learning elements that they need to move forward. So both in school and in their personal lives. Um, Repetitive behaviors, you'll see this, it's pretty common. A lot of movies and stuff show the repetitive behaviors of autism. It's one of the things that a lot of people think all autistic people have, but it's not everyone. Some autistic people use repetitive behaviors. It's typically used as a comforting coping strategy for them, especially if they're overloaded or they're feeling anxious. You'll see it a lot, like the hand flapping, they rock back and forth. And sometimes you'll see it more in the terms of like an OCD type movement. So you'll have certain individuals who will need to turn off a light 3 times and then turn, in order to turn it on. You'll be able to see kind of that they'll get fixated in a specific routine or pattern. So when we're looking at someone who's trying to get out the door quickly, we'll have a lot of issues because they didn't do step 2 and 3 in the normal routine. But as a parent, you're like, we got to get out the door. It doesn't matter. We don't need to do that today. But for them, they're very fixated on that routine and they need to complete those steps, even though we may not see it as important. they have to do it for themselves. So a lot of people call these repetitive behaviors stimming. I like to always let people know that I personally believe that everyone stims. We all tend to fidget with things. We all tend to tap our fingers. We tend to, cross our arms when we're uncomfortable. We tend to make ourselves feel comfortable in some sort of way when we are feeling out of sorts. And so you'll see it with how even individuals without autism speak with their hands, or they tap their feet, or they cross their legs. Um, it's all a part of trying to regulate your body. We just see them in typically bigger movements with people with autism. Um, a lot of people with autism have sensory sensitivities. Um, they can also have deficits in sensory sensitivities. So you can have this can be heightened awareness of things. It can also be reduced sensitivity to things, especially with younger kids that you're wondering if they have autism or not. A lot of times you'll see it if like sirens are going off and everyone's trying to cover their ears. You're gonna see the kid just sitting there and being like, "What's up? I don't know why everyone's freaking out." It will be one of those things that you could see. You have other kiddos who, you know, just the sound of a fan is going to drive them nuts, and they could be rooms away and you're like, how could you possibly hear that? But they have a heightened awareness of those sounds. A lot of our autistic community struggles with textures and smells, and this can lead to a lot of issues with eating, which a lot of our autistic friends will need to get some kind of food therapy through an occupational therapist or something to help them with. Um, we call them texture eaters, or, you know, they want something specific that's normalized. You'll see a lot of issues with nutrition and things because they want just chicken nuggets. The thing with prepackaged and processed foods is that, unlike getting fruits and vegetables at the market, what is prepackaged is going to be the same basically every single time you eat it. Whereas when you go to fruits and vegetables in the store, you could get blueberries one time and they're super sweet and they're great, and the next time they're bitter or they don't have much flavor to them. And so when you're hypersensitive to what those things are, you're going to tend to go towards more things that you can predict what they're going to taste like or how they're going to be able to react to those foods. Um, the the final one is kind of a whole grouping of different behaviors altogether that people with autism will struggle with, and it's called executive functioning. Executive functioning, in its basis, is a set of cognitive processes, so mental processes that help us manage and regulate our thoughts, our actions, and our emotions. Um, this can be working memory, so the ability to hold and manipulate information over time. You'll see this a lot with, telling them something and then asking them to repeat it back right away, and they may not be able to do that, which means that we would need to work on working memory for them. You have an inhibitory control, so this is like that self control, that managing your impulses, not reacting right away, being able to pause and control what you're doing and how you're doing it. You have your cognitive flexibility. That one is really hard because, especially if we have some of those repetitive behaviors, we tend to see some issues in this area as well. And it can be a skill to be able to switch from one task to another, or adapt to changes in the environment or in the demands that are being placed on you. And they really tend to like more of a schedule and knowing what to anticipate, and so being able to be flexible is something that sometimes they have to learn how to do. Um, Planning and organizing, setting goals, developing strategies, prioritizing tasks. A lot of times these are hard skills for them to learn as well. Um, and that also plays into the self-monitoring piece. A lot of children, especially with autism, struggle to be independent. They struggle to transition between activities or follow multiple step instructions, um, and just be able to monitor how they're doing and make adjustments if they need. So they'll need help being able to learn how to do that. The other thing is, for executive functioning, it's a big part of our emotional regulation. So it's the capability to manage and respond to emotional experiences appropriately. People with autism tend to either overreact or underreact, to a lot of those emotional conversations and things, that are going on around them. It can be a combination of their sensory, sensitivities mixed with the inflexibility, mixed with, the emotions that they're all feeling, and that compounded can make it very difficult for them to move forward in those high emotional states. Um, Basically, the executive functioning it are all processes for that are essential for daily activities like following instructions, problem solving, and adapting to new situations. So they're incredibly vital that they get taught how to do those things and learn tools and tricks to help them be more successful at that independently. I know I had one question on the DSM. Um, I just want you to know that so the DSM is a book. It's like a diagnostic manual used by psychologists for mental health issues, and it has criteria for every mental health disorder and what each person will meet for the criteria on whether or not they can be diagnosed with a certain disorder. And so for autism, it is a part of um, the DSM, and it's how they diagnose it is by making sure they're meeting the criteria in a set amount of ways. For autism specifically, there are 7 criteria, and they must meet 5 of the 7 in order to be diagnosed with autism. All right. Does anyone else have any questions in there?
I had a
Rachel,
question.
oh, yeah. Hold on one second. Rachel, we're gonna get to some of the student stuff in the classroom here in a little bit. And if we don't answer your question, please ask me more specific questions as we get there, okay? Yeah, someone else had a question?
Yeah. I have a son who's autistic and he's 19 now. And a question that I had is, um, I feel like the gaps are getting bigger now that he's older. When he's a
Mhm.
child, you kind of see things, but lots of children do things, and
Yeah.
then now as he's an adult, you start seeing, wow, like this is really far from what a non-autistic person would be doing who's at this age. But my
Mhm.
question is so, like, I have a daughter who's dyslexic. She overcomes that by learning how to read. Do you not really ever
Mhm.
overcome it? Is it just coping mechanisms?
Yeah, autism is not something that you can, get rid of. You're always going to be autistic if you're diagnosed as autistic. Now, the skills that you can learn are going to be skills that can help it be less impeding on your day-to-day life. And there are different techniques and things that therapists can use in a vast area of different therapies that can help them with developing the skills that they need. The older that someone gets when they have autism, the longer it takes to see those changes and the harder it is to see some of those long-term changes. That doesn't mean it's not possible. It just means that it's harder. Um, and sometimes it's as easy as giving them, a process to work through and they can see the success of that process. Sometimes it's a list, like we call them task analysis and applied behavior analysis, but it's basically just a checklist of when you're doing this, you need to make sure you're accomplishing step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And it allows them to become more independent and see some of that. Some of it is a lot more nuanced and it's a lot harder to teach. And we have to use more of a natural approach. So coming in their natural environment, seeing what's happening and figuring out why it's happening, so that we can figure out what kind of treatment would be most appropriate in that situation. It's just really hard. Every single person is different. And that's the same with people with autism. They're all going to respond differently. They're all doing things for a specific reason. We just have to figure out what it is. And that helps us to be able to create a treatment plan that would be successful for them individually. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And the last thing I would say is, I feel like so with those OCD type behaviors or
Hmm.
they have to, he does the lights and things like that. But when we
Hmm.
break him out of those, he just picks
Hmm.
up new ones. You know what
Yes,
I mean?
that
He
is a
just finds new
common.
things to be obsessed about. So anyway,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And you are correct. That does happen a lot of times. So you can break one chain and then now you're working on another one. Um, what we have found, we believe in the field I work in, which is applied behavior analysis or ABA, is that if we can really figure out what the function of the behavior is before we create some kind of plan or treatment to break it, that will be more successful in stopping some of those additional behaviors that you're going to see come out at the end. It doesn't always work, but typically, we're going to see more success when we're putting more science behind the treatment that we're prescribing. So, older adults too, I just have to say, um, Jenny and I both work with a lot of young adults. And after about the age of 23, it becomes incredibly hard to be able to provide services. Especially in ABA, it's typically done as an early intervention. And so by the time someone is 23, most insurance companies will say that it will no longer be effective for older adults. It's not true. Our science definitely has been able to prove that there definitely is a basis for being able to continue ABA past that age. Unfortunately, we're just not there yet with insurance companies, and I wish we were. There are programs, though, that are out there for adults with autism and with other disabilities, that they can have people that will help them and provide some of that, guidance on what to do next and where to move forward and how to get the help that you're seeking. So I would encourage you to do that as well. Masking, yes, masking is huge for autism and actually for a lot of people without autism. You will find masking primarily done with females that are diagnosed with autism, but you will see it with males as well. But females are harder to diagnose with autism because of the masking. Masking just basically means taking on the attributes or the things that you're seeing from the person across from you. Um, if you were to talk to someone who has a Southern accent, and all of a sudden you start picking up a Southern accent, that would be a form of masking if you don't typically talk with a Southern accent. Um, and a lot of the girls who are diagnosed with autism, they tend to get really good at trying to figure out, well, what's expected of me and what do they want from me? Well, if I fit in and I look and sound like them, then it won't be a problem. And so they learn from at a young age um, to really just blend in. And that's really what masking is. It's incredibly um, common with autistic kids, but especially autistic girls. So we see that a lot. This will I have learned that it's acceptable and I've learned to mask the obvious signs. Yes. Ditto. I also mask a ton. Um, and it has a lot to do with your background and it can have to do with trauma histories and everything else, as well as autism. If you do have a diagnosis of autism as well. Sorry, I'm trying to read and talk at the same time, guys, and sometimes that doesn't come out clearly. I apologize, but let me know if you need me to kind of detail some of this out a little bit as well. I'm just looking through the chat and seeing when people bring something up. So please keep the questions coming. I really appreciate it. And I want to make sure you guys get the information that's helpful to you. So let's talk a little bit about some of those learning challenges and things to kind of watch out for. Autism basically can impact learning in various ways because of all those different skill challenges that we were talking about earlier. These can affect each individual differently. Some will be affected greatly and some very minimally, some not at all. Typically, though, when we're looking at learning in autism, we're going to come up with a few challenges and struggles. So communication is one of the biggest challenges, especially when we're looking at a school setting with kids with autism. This also would transition into jobs and things for young adults or adults with autism. Basically, the difficulty with verbal and nonverbal communication can make it hard for children to understand and express their needs or their questions. If they don't have a solid foundation on how to express those, then you're going to see things like behaviors pop up to take the place of where typical communication would normally fit. So, for example, if you were to have a child who really wants cookies, and this child doesn't speak verbally or vocally, you would typically see them either go to the pantry and pull the cookies out themselves and just grab them. If they're independent, you're going to see behaviors arise where they're like screaming and shouting and going crazy, maybe having a tantrum. Um, all of that is communication, and they're trying to let us know, hey, I really want a cookie right now. But unfortunately, they just don't know how to ask for it in a way that their peers at their same age would typically ask for that. The next one is going to be that struggle with those social interactions again. So they're going to struggle with the social cues. They're going to struggle with the back and forth conversation within a group. They're going to struggle with advocating for themselves, saying their opinion. A lot of times you'll see that masking a little more where they're like, oh yeah, I don't want to rock the boat at all. I'm just going to go with whatever everyone else is saying, even though it's not something that they necessarily want to do and that's not their opinion. You're going to see that the social interactions specifically, especially once you're at that third grade level or higher, you're going to see that it impacts the effect of the group learning activities and the ability for them to collaborate with their peers and stuff in the classroom. And so you're going to start seeing a lot of those deficits, even if you have a student who has autism and is vocal. Sometimes you'll start seeing those deficits kind of show greater and greater distances from the pure norm that you see in a classroom. You're going to have some of those executive functioning challenges. So you're going to have students that, can't figure out how to write in a planner to even keep it up to help them. You're going to see them lose papers and not know where their things are, not have the organization that they need. They're not going to be able to quickly adapt. So they're going to lack the flexibility to be able to do tasks independently. Or if they don't have one piece of information, they're going to find themselves coming to a standstill and not being able to move on to maybe a later part of the project or the assignment because of the one piece of information they don't have, even though they have information that they need for the rest of the assignments. Basically, you're also going to see that flexibility piece come back into play when you're looking at transitioning between classrooms. In elementary schools specifically, you're going to see like specials classes and things like that where kids are going to struggle to leave one class into another. And then you have a lot of schools that have block schedules or weekly schedules where even when they are in a class in their primary classroom, one day they're going to go to music, the next day they're going to go to gym, the next day they go to art. And for them, it's going to take them longer to be able to understand what schedule they're actually seeing. And then they're going to have some issues adapting if that schedule changes or something unanticipated happens. And so you will see some of that stuff as well. With the repeated behaviors and the restricted interests that we see with our autistic kiddos, you're going to see hyper focus on certain topics and then total disinterest in other topics. And unfortunately, especially in school settings, we're going to need to be able to focus on things even if we're not interested in them. And some of our kiddos really struggle to be able to see why they would need to do that or how that decision now affects that future, of what their grade looks like, or needing to know that information to move on to the next topic in the same subjects. A lot of times we'll see this with math. If they're not interested in learning like the addition and everything else, then when they get to multiplication, the teacher really struggles because they don't have the foundation they needed, from that addition, that was taught prior. So basically, a focus on specific topics or routines can really limit their exposure, to the broader range of information and the learning opportunities that they really need to move forward. And so you'll see that as one of the learning challenges, for our kiddos with ASD. The other thing to think about with them is that what normally works in most classrooms for motivation and reinforcement, so behavior charts, prize boxes, things like that in the classroom, um, won't typically or won't always be effective, for kids with ASD. Typically, their reinforcers or what motivates them to do something is going to be different than what their typical peers would be motivated by. And so we may need to get more creative. They're going to require more personalized approaches, to encourage that engagement and that learning. Um, the biggest one, and the one that a lot of the parents with kiddos with ASD really experience it, is the behavioral issues. We have a combination of anxiety, frustration, lack of communication, struggles with verbal, um, so sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. The social cues and everything else. Um, and that can lead to behaviors that disrupt the learning not only for the child with ASD, but also for the other kids in the classroom. We can have anything from just sitting there in their chair, not doing anything, not listening, just kind of fidgeting. And a lot of teachers kind of prefer that because at least it's not disrupting everyone else. But the truth is that that child isn't learning. They're not, engaging with the work that's in front of them. They're not moving forward with the goals that, they really need to focus on. And so that doesn't work either. And then we have the other extreme where we've got kids who are not only disruptive, but aggressive in the classroom. They can be a danger to themselves and to others in the classroom. And unfortunately, with a school, they're going to have to put themselves in that place and make sure that they're taking care of those, situations very quickly and efficiently. It also means that if you are a parent who has a child who has those behavioral issues, it's typically going to lead to suspensions or getting calls from the office saying you've got to go and get your kid today, which is disruptive to their learning. It becomes very problematic in the future, and placements in schools end up becoming issues as well if it's left alone for too long. So it's definitely an important thing to, get help with and get supports with, as soon as you know you're dealing with anything like that. I would say on all ends of the spectrum, whether you've got the totally disinterested kid or the kid that's very aggressive, I would say both are incredibly important to make sure you've got supports in place to make sure they're taken care of. Um, and that kind of leads me to the point that with all of these issues and challenges that are out there, um, there are laws in place and programs in place within the schools to help with supports, to make sure that they get custom tailored approaches with individual goals and plans that can help them to be successful and to thrive and to succeed in these learning environments. A lot of that is just about knowing when we have an issue and knowing where to go once we see that issue. And so we'll talk a little more about that here as we go as well. I just want to open it up again. Does anyone have any questions about some of these learning challenges? Or have any questions that they would like me to go over before I move on? No? Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit about some treatment and intervention. So I'm going to go back to some of the school stuff here in a little bit, but for right now, I really want to just let you know that if you are one of those parents that has a kiddo that has ASD, you're not alone, and there are treatments out there. There are people out there that are specialized in helping you deal with the behaviors and to teach the skills that they're lacking, or to teach the skills of how to cope. A lot of what I do on a daily basis and what Jenny does on a daily basis is looking at a child and figuring out what do we have going on and what can we do to help them? What would be successful? So Jenny and I both work in applied behavior analysis, or ABA. We work at a clinic here in town called Springs Learning Community. Applied behavior analysis is one of the leading behavioral therapies for autism. And it is an evidence-based practice, and it is covered by insurance companies to have children with autism, and honestly, a lot of other, um, developmental disabilities as well, come in and get help with whatever skills they're lacking or to reduce unwanted behaviors and things like that. Um, Another great resource is speech therapy, um, especially with our kids that lack clear verbal vocal skills. We want to make sure that they're getting into a speech therapist, making sure that there's not something that's causing these speech delays. Make sure that they have those foundational skills to be able to acquire communication and to use it effectively. Not only so that they can be understood, but that they can understand others as well. Another therapy that you'll see a lot with children with ASD is going to be occupational therapy. You'll see this in a whole bunch of different ways. Occupational therapy for autism actually has multiple different types of therapies that they use. Sometimes you'll see them using dogs and animals, equine therapy. It helps with sensory regulation, trusting, developing skills that can be used for daily living tasks, such as brushing and things like that. A lot of people look at it and they're like, oh, what are they doing? But all the skills are intended to be able to move to everyday situations. And that's why they're using one skill that hopefully is more reinforcing and rewarding, because a lot of the kids do like working with the animals and things like that. And they'll be able to shape that behavior into something that's in their homes and in their daily lives. And it's a really cool process to be able to see as occupational therapists do that. They also work on fine motor and gross motor skills and that sensory processing, regulation, and coping skills. So occupational therapists tend to be a big part, as well as speech therapists. Sometimes we do have physical therapists as well that end up working with kiddos with ASD, especially if we have things with gross motor skills, balance or coordination that are off. One common thing that you can see with kids with autism is they call it toe walking, and you'll see them walk up on their tiptoes. And this ends up actually shortening their hamstring. And a physical therapist can come in and work with them and do different techniques to help lengthen that hamstring again and hopefully get them to be able to walk more flat-footed so that they're safer and they have better balance and coordination. So you'll see that as well. There's other reasons that physical therapists would be called in for kiddos with ASD as well. there can be issues with different joints for any individual, really, not even just with ASD, but any person in general could need a physical therapist at any point in their life. And so we do see them quite often. Um, we call it an interdisciplinary team when we work as a group to help a single child with their issues using the different therapies of, ABA, speech therapy, OT, and PT. And um, we really think that it's important to have a collaborative team, one that's willing to talk to each other, work on things together, hear each other out, and make sure that um, everything that's being done for that child is to the child's benefit, and not just because, oh, this is what I've always done. There is no one symptom or behavior that makes someone autistic. And just like every single one of our autistic kids is different, there's no single treatment that's going to be effective for every single one. It should be individualized. It should be something that is specific to that child and what their needs are. And sometimes that means being creative. Sometimes that means working within a team to make sure that their needs are met. So just make sure, especially as a parent, if you do have a child with autism, make sure that those interventions are tailored and unique for your kid. They should not be a cookie cutter program. They should not be, oh, well, this has worked with everyone else, so it will work with your kid. It definitely should be more specialized and it should be specific to their strengths and their challenges. So I just want to make sure you guys knew all about that. I'm going to send this back over to Jenny. She's going to talk to you guys a little more about ABA in general for a minute.
Hello again. So ABA is actually the science of behavior. So we really focus on looking at behavior, why behavior occurs, and we kind of modify behavior and turn it into more appropriate ways of social interactions. So as Justine was saying before, communication is very important, and a child will tantrum, say in the grocery store. I'm sure a lot of parents have experienced this. You're going down, ready to check out. Kiddo sees a chocolate bar, candy bar, and they really want it. They start tantruming. They just don't know how to effectively ask for it. So that tantrum is communicating that they want something. So as applied behavior analysts like me and Justine are, we are going to look at that and modify that behavior and teach them how to ask appropriately instead of engaging in those ineffective behaviors such as screaming, crying, tantruming. Justine also touched on aggression. So some of our friends with autism, that is one of their ways to communicate that they are not happy, they don't like something, they're uncomfortable. So that's really kind of what we do, is we look and focus on the behavior and modify it. This can also include increasing behaviors. It's like the communication, increasing social skills, just the behavior in and of itself. It is an evidence-based therapy. There have been many studies done to show that ABA is effective in helping individuals with autism. We focus mainly on, like I said, working on increasing those communication skills, those social skills, and we do a lot of this by using positive reinforcement, meaning we're going to provide something that is reinforcing for the kiddo, and it's going to help increase those behaviors. We use reinforcement every day. We do it for ourselves. Like, we wake up early in the morning, I'm going to go get a coffee. I'm reinforcing myself for waking up early. So everybody does it. We just do it more direct and targeted for specific behaviors. Again, going back to what Justine was saying, ABA is 100% unique per individual person. So it's not a cookie cutter treatment that's going to work for everybody. Each individual has their own treatment plan. They have their own goals and different things that they're working for, in addition to having their own ways of working towards those goals and interventions that are put in place for them. All right, I see a few questions coming up in the chat. Give me just a second to read through some of them. So there is one, is there trainings available for families with children with ASD? Justine, I'm not sure if if you want to help answer this as well. I don't know if there are like generalized
There
classes, but
there are
if you would
definitely
know.
YouTube videos, and there's definitely different web resources through different websites that provide parent training and parent help. The other resource that you can have is you can reach out to ABA clinics as well, and typically they're going to have a parent training version where they can help you work on specific issues that are happening within your home in an ABA process, but not within a clinic. So we do have parent training only models and things like that that are available through ABA providers. You also have websites out there. So, um, Autism Speaks, one of the big ones, they will have lots of links to different websites that are specific to autism parents. They also have a handbook that they have available for free on their website that can help you with some of the resources on where to start. Um, I know that the autism community in general, you're going to see a lot of different feedback from people who are now adults who had different treatments and who went through different things with their families. Um, and so keep in mind what works for one doesn't work for another. And it really should be more individualized, understanding where your child actually is and what they need and what they're trying to gain from their behavior is a huge component. And I know Jenny's going to touch on that here in just a little bit as well. But there are resources out there. There are trainings available. In Colorado Springs specifically, if you are looking for services or help with your autistic child. The Resource Exchange TRE is what is used for El Paso County. And they would be able to get you in and make sure that they do an eval and see how they can help you with whatever issues that you guys are having, and to help you figure out if there is a company in the city or online that might be able to assist you as well. And so that is a resource to you, and I do encourage you guys all to use them if you have those questions. Um, I know that there was a question on what the possible cause of autism is. Um, they are still trying to figure it out. They're they do definitively know that it does not occur because of any kind of immunizations that are given, and a lot of people have been taught that over the years that that is where it came from, but that has been debunked. There's no truth to that. There are genetic components. There are how a child is raised. There are environmental factors. All of these things are still being researched and studied, and they are trying to figure out what the actual cause of it is. The research that's going on right now, there is a lot of genome testing and everything else that's going on. And as that comes out, they are seeing things that appear to be something that could be a predictor of autism. But it's only in 50% of the cases. The other 50% of autistic persons, unfortunately, they don't have a understanding yet of how they developed it or why they did. They just know that they have it. And so it is still very much being debated and figured out. And hopefully in the next decade or so, hopefully we'll have an answer to that question. Holly, in regards to adult groups, there are social groups that are out there for autistic kiddos to be able to learn social skills and to develop those skills. I know when they're older, and I know you had said earlier that your son was older, these become a little harder to find. I typically recommend that you find an interest that he has and see what is available. Um, One thing that has been successful for some of our families is that the library itself holds board game groups and D&D groups and things like that. And some of these kids can really benefit from just being a part of those things. So they can go in and they can play board games with kids that are their age and just have that opportunity to socialize, get out of the house. and they do just fine just being able to have that opportunity. But find something that interests them and see if you can't find a group that does that, and see if they wouldn't welcome him in and see if he could be a part of it. That would be my biggest suggestion to you.
Brittany, yes, that is typical for kids, for your kiddo. So, like Justine was saying, sensory is also a spectrum. So some kiddos absolutely hate being dirty, others absolutely love being dirty. So that is definitely a typical thing. Hating to be washed off, scrubbed down, get all that dirt off, that's also typical. It's different for every single individual, and there's really not an actual like set in stone, this is what every single kiddo is wanting, if that kind of helps. uh
Yeah.
and then any
And
additional thoughts?
Blake, that's good information. I didn't know that Autism Vision of Colorado had a group. I would say too, one of the best resources is to connect with other parents that have kids with autism, see what they have found, see what is helping them. I feel like I learned the most information from the parents who are living it, and finding what resources are out there. It's just great to be able to connect, and if that means that we're connecting over the diagnosis, then that's great. But it just honestly, it's the best place to just talk and see what other people have done and what they've used and what they like and they don't like.
Mhm.
Another question I had is the last time that I was trying to seek out ABA therapy, there was wait lists and everyone was online only.
Yes. So unfortunately, ABA
Mhm.
does have long wait lists depending on where you go. Majority of ABA clinics will have a wait list, just because it is such a like focused practice, and there's only so many slots per clinic due to capacity. So that is one of the hit or miss things that you're going to see. So it's also one of those things you said a lot of them were online. That kind of is clinic specific. So I would just recommend looking to see if there's any clinics out there that have social groups that are in person. So I know we are currently doing in-person services. Like I said, it kind of just depends on the clinic. Let's go back.
I would say too, don't be afraid to get on that wait list, because I know for our clinic specifically, we'll be at a place where we're at capacity. We can't possibly take another client. And especially with Colorado Springs as it is, we have a lot of military families, and all of a sudden we'll have like 5 families all PCS at the same time. And all of a sudden we have 5 openings when we had 0 like 2 weeks before. Um, so please join waitlists if you think that your child would benefit from that. Don't be afraid of it. Although we try to give the best estimates as possible, we don't know either. And we're doing the best we can for the most kids we can. Jenny and I both at this point are both trying to get certified as BCBAs, and we're getting through that process. Again, because we know there are so few practitioners to what the need is. And so we're encouraging people to get into the field to really understand it and to get educated in it, so that hopefully we can get these wait lists down. And hopefully more people have the opportunity to get involved in the treatments that they feel will help their kids, and that we hope to help those kids with. I know there's a lot of Facebook groups and stuff for parents with autistic children. I would recommend looking for those and finding one that fits your needs. Aisha, I know you had put that question in there. And I think that's a big one. With the social media, I think most of the support groups have gone more to the social media platforms. There are some clinics and some bigger organizations that offer more of a support group setting. I know they do like monthly meetings and things like that, and you'll be able to find some of those on some of the websites specific to autism. And so I definitely recommend do a Google search, see what you can find, read about what their group offers, and see if it fits what you're looking for. That would be my best advice there. Yeah, autism experts as well. That is true.
Yes, TRE is also a great resource to look through. They also have resources for, oh my goodness, my brain is gone. Give me just a second and find the word, and then I'll pop back in here. Sorry, early intervention. They have a lot of early
Oh.
intervention resources
Oh,
as well.
yes.
I'm so sorry. That just slipped my
Mhm.
mind.
Yeah.
In terms of remote ABA services working, so it kind of depends on the family. Sometimes it can be very useful for friends, or individuals with autism, especially if they are okay being in front of a screen and being able to have those communication like over a video like we're doing now. Other friends, it might not be as successful for, especially if you have an autistic kiddo who is super busybodied, always running around, doesn't want to stay still. It really just depends on the individual, age, family, a lot of different aspects go into that if it would be successful. Again, it would just be if talking to whoever is at your clinic, the BCBA, and seeing if that would be effective for that kiddo.
Blake, your question on is there housing assistance available for young adults? That is a great question for TRE. They have social workers that work with DHS in El Paso County that will be able to help you with Medicaid waivers, which would cover situations like what you're talking about for a young adult with disabilities that works part-time. There are host homes and things like that that they have available in Colorado Springs and El Paso County in general, that can help with that stuff, but it is done through the Department of Human Services.
Yes.
And TRE is the place you go for that.
Yes.
Can I jump in there? I am a host home for my son and have gone through TRE, and you have to be on a waiver. Well, we homeschooled for 15 years, and since my son wasn't on an IEP, I didn't know that I could get on a waiver. So any of you guys who are homeschooling, you might want to know that even if you're doing therapy not within the school system, you probably want to get them on an IEP so that you can get services later when they are getting near graduation, or for adult services. It's very helpful to have it because I didn't have it. And so then I had to jump through a lot of hoops.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Holly. Honestly, TRE is an amazing resource and they'll help you with some of that stuff as well. I highly recommend talking to them, seeing what information they can give you about your specific situation. They know so much about all the programs and the ability of different waivers to help with different things. They can see into the future because they know what makes it easier to apply later on for the things you're going to want after a child becomes an adult. And they'll be able to really help you determine what is the best thing for your situation. They're very knowledgeable. They're nice to work with and everything else. But they do have a lot of different resources at their fingertips, and advice. You really don't know what you don't know. And they're a great place to start and make sure that you're getting educated on what's out there and what you don't know and might need to know in the future, to start putting things in place for your kids that turn into young adults. And there's a lot of legalities and things like that too that they can help through. Um, when a child is no longer a child, legally, but they also can't support themselves and they may not have the intellectual, level to be able to support themselves or take care of themselves. And so those are important resources to make sure that you're using, and that you're reaching out for. So I definitely recommend that.
All
Yep.
right. Any other questions before we move on? All righty. All right, Miss Justine, if you could click the next slide. Thanks. So ABA focuses a lot on functions of behavior. So as Justine was saying, every behavior occurs for a reason. We look at the function. Within our field, there are 4 functions of behavior, and we look at this when working with our autistic friends, individuals, adults, whoever we're working with, to determine why the behavior is occurring. So the first one we'll go over is attention. So the child will, for these instances, we'll just refer to them as children, but this will work for any age. So for attention, it would be if a child is engaging in a tantrum, they are wanting the adult's attention if mom's cooking dinner. So they will accept any form of attention, whether it is positive attention or negative attention, and that would be the function for that tantrum. Another function would be escape or avoidance of a task that was placed. This could be they really do not want to brush their teeth right now, so they're going to run away. They're going to engage in any kind of behavior so they do not have to do that specific task. There's also tangible, meaning they just really want something, whether it be a toy, food, a blanket, really whatever they're wanting in that moment. They're going to communicate somehow that they want that item. And then sensory. So like we were talking about, a lot of people with autism have those sensory needs, whether it's those deep compressions. One of you mentioned your little really likes to be dirty. They're going to go out of their way to seek that sensory input, or get rid of that sensory input. So if we want to move on, we're going to talk about different strategies when approaching the form or functions of behavior, sorry. So a main one is we're going to teach appropriate communication skills. So we'll go back to our example of walking down the aisle, ready to check out at the grocery store, and they really, really just want this candy bar. We're going to teach them the appropriate way to ask. Instead of throwing a tantrum while they're in the cart, we're going to teach them, I want this candy bar. Teach them different ways to communicate that without needing to engage in those behaviors that we don't typically see, or that we want to reduce. We're going to modify their environment also. So we're going to, like, for escape or avoid, we're going to make the tasks easier. We're going to make them less aversive. We're going to make them, even if we're going to clean up this entire puzzle of 100 pieces, you have to pick up 2 and I'm going to pick up the rest. We're just going to make it easier for them. So it makes them less likely to engage in those behaviors that we don't want to see. We're going to do something in the field that we call differential reinforcement. So that's going to be reinforcing behaviors that are different, or a different option for what they're engaging in currently. This would look like those communication skills, different ways to like manage our emotions, regulation skills, things like that. For our attention seeking friends, we're going to give them scheduling access to that. So we're going to be like, okay, I need to cook dinner in 5 minutes. We can go play a game. We can go do different things. So you're going to allow them to know, hey, you're going to get this. You're going to get what you want. But we have to first, I have to complete this task, because I mean, parents have to complete things and their kiddos have to have time to be able to do things on their own. So you're just going to let them know those things. We're also going to do prompting, or just encouraging them to engage in the correct behavior that we're wanting to see, and kind of talking them through how to get to the final result of what we're really wanting. Do we have any questions on functions of behavior before I turn it back over to Justine?
All right, let's talk about schools. I know some of you guys, your kids are already kind of past that school age thing. But for schools, there are supports for kiddos with ASD or any other learning disability, not only are those supports available, but they are guaranteed by law through IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. There are two types of plans that schools will write. They will write an IEP, or an individualized education plan, or they'll write a behavior plan, also known as a 504 plan. Both of them provide accommodations or supports, if you will, for students with disabilities. These supports can vary pretty significantly from kid to kid. The biggest difference between the IEP or the 504 is that the IEP is going to require assessments and evaluations in order to provide services. They're normally going to be for disabilities that are more significant. If you have a child who has a 504 plan, typically these just need a doctor's note or something saying, yes, this is the diagnosis they have, maybe some of the things we need you to work on. It's normally a parent meeting between you and the special education teacher, maybe another paraprofessional. And they can typically write a 504 pretty quickly and get that approved. Whereas an IEP is more extensive and has many more steps that you would need to follow. For every district and every school, that IEP process is different. So one of the best things I can tell you to do is get on it early. If you think that you need it, make sure that you're touching base with those schools. Make sure that you're letting them know in writing, because there is different stuff that comes up with how long they have to respond and whether or not they have to respond if you only have a conversation verbally with them as you're doing drop off or something like that. So make sure you're always following up in writing, whether that's an email, whether that is a note that's sent into the school, in one way, shape, or form. Make sure that you're doing it in written communication with the school so that you can have the benefits of time starting for what is going on. With school supports, I just want to talk a little bit about ASD specifically, and some of the supports that we have seen be successful and that you can ask for within the schools. So basically, every autistic kiddo is different, and what they struggle with in the classroom is going to vary greatly. We have a lot of autistic kiddos that do great, but they really struggle to stay in their seats. You might see a 504 plan put in place for a kid like that, that would allow them to sit in like a wiggle chair or in the non-restrictive seating area, which is going to be like bean bags or something that a teacher has in their classroom. And it gives them the ability to be able to move, take breaks, and things like that, without having negative impacts of being in trouble for getting up or anything like that. That's a lot of the sensory equipment that I was kind of going at. Is we see flexible seating as a huge part of that. Noise canceling headphones, fidgets. There are bands that can be put on desks and chairs that can allow kids to either push back on them or to push forward to get their sensory needs met, especially when they're anxious about something. I mean, I'm sitting here playing with my pen as I speak, so I obviously would use things like poppets and any of the fidget toys that are out there. There are pencil holders that are textured, that are designed specifically for kids with autism to make sure that they have their sensory needs met. There's things called calming strips, which are literally stickers that can be put on desktops, that can help kids as well. These are all accommodations that schools can make to help meet the sensory needs of kids with autism. For kids who have more significant needs within the classroom, you're likely to see the use of a paraprofessional. Most of you have probably heard it as a para. These are people who provide dedicated support for kids with disabilities during the school day. Now, you can have a variety of limits to what a paraprofessional can handle. You'll have a limit of someone who has a one-on-one para. That means that this person goes with that child everywhere they go in that building. They are one-on-one. They are there to make sure that child is safe and doesn't hurt others. They will help with classwork. They will help with behavior protocols. They will help with anything that's going on in that day-to-day situation for that child. You could also see paraprofessionals that are on a 1-to-5 basis or ratio. These are going to be paras that typically are checking in once a day with kids. They're going to have 5 kids that they're responsible for. If there's an issue that comes up or arises, typically they're going to be sent to the location where the child is. Um, and if there are no issues, they are responsible to touch base on certain things or to help in specific classes where that child is struggling. So you'll see them scheduled out. They're not with that child constantly, but they will be with that child during certain areas of the schedule. And so it can have, you know, I guess lots of different implications on whether or not a para is with your student. But it is something that's available, especially if you have a higher needs kiddo. It's definitely something that most IEPs will suggest. Um, Adapted curriculum. This is probably one of my favorite uh, accommodations that is not only for ASD, but especially our kiddos with ADHD as well. It's modifying the curriculum to meet the student where they are. Um, if that means that we do chunking, which means we only present a portion of the assignment at a time so they don't get overwhelmed. Or maybe it means that, you know, I really struggle with reading and I'm not quite there yet. So I'm going to start my reading time with the teacher at a small group. Um, and then I'm going to move into more independent skills once I've had that additional contact to get the help that I need. Um, Adapted curriculum is a huge piece for our kids, whether they are advanced or whether they're behind. A lot of times when we have autistic kids, we can also get kids that are very gifted in math and sciences, in reading. And so a lot of behaviors occur because we're bored. So a lot of this adapted curriculum will allow them to be at the level that they're actually at, instead of sitting behind and being bored with where their current class is at with their skills. And so it works both ways, whether we're behind in skills or we're ahead in skills. Adapted curriculum can help on both sides of that. Reduced workload. One of the biggest things for autism in general is just that they don't know where to even start sometimes, and they just stop before they've even started. And so reduced workloads can adjust the amount of work that they're seeing so that they're not so overwhelmed. It can also look like I'm going to put a prompt in here. Hey, I want you to start on question 3, or you only have to do odd problems, or only have to do even problems, or we only have to do homework 2 times a week. Any type of adaptation to the work that's being done. Typically, schools are going to look at what is the necessary work that needs to be done to make sure we're meeting the learning parameters and the foundational skills that are necessary. And then they're going to that's like excess work or unnecessary, tedious tasks, things like that. So it's a great support or resource to have written into your IEPs and your 504s. Safe spaces. A lot of times this can be a classroom. Sometimes it can be a corner of a hallway. I've seen it be I don't know if you guys are familiar with Rampart High School, but they have these pipes in the hallway. And I've seen kids that just like to sit on those pipes. They've got these little indents in there and it's quiet. And when we have someone who really can't take the noise, they like to find those safe places. It can also mean that they're allowed to take breaks. They're allowed to say, hey, I need to go to the bathroom. I need to take a walk down the hallway. I need to get a drink of water. That way they can work on regulation skills so that they don't lose their cool and don't cause issues within the classroom itself. All of that is kind of the safe spaces part of the supports. Visual supports are mostly pictures. You're going to see that a lot. Sometimes you'll also see timers and things like that that are used. but a lot of it is just that connection between what is being said, and there's a disconnect with our autistic friends where they need to see it. And so you'll see visual schedules used, you'll see first then boards used, you'll see those behavior charts. I am not a fan personally, but you will see them used as well, and they are considered a visual support as well. Um, but basically those schedules, those charts, those timers to allow them to know when they're expected to make the next move and how much time they have left. Um, just prep them and help them anticipate the changes that are coming so that it's less um, anxiety ridden to them. They can prepare themselves, they can make sure they're ready for that next step. I think I covered all of them. I kind of jumped around a little bit, but I think I went through it. So, does anyone have any questions on behavior supports or like what your school can provide and how that works? Sounds like everyone's good right now. Let me know
I
if you come up with something. Oh, yep.
I have a few questions on that.
Yeah.
So my children are in high school, and
Mhm.
so I'm struggling with the school right now to get those supports in place.
Mhm.
Um, they have a 504 requesting the IEP, asking for testing, asking for these different things, and I just wanted to know, are there any specialty things that you have to have in place for the high school level or for college level?
Are you asking if there's specific supports that are required for autistic learners? There
Yeah,
are
because
not.
they're not, but if they have a 504, the school currently isn't following it. Then I was told with a child that
Yeah.
had an IEP that a lot of colleges would not take them with the IEP, and it was better to take them off the IEP and put them on a 504 so college would accept them.
I highly disagree. I you have a federal law protecting you for your IEP. And regardless if the school wants to or not, they have to accept the needs. Now, they can tell you they can't provide certain accommodations, but once they've agreed to those accommodations through the IEP and the meeting has occurred and it's been finalized, they're required to provide the supports that they've agreed to. Now, if you need an advocate or anything else, there are advocates that can be provided for specific needs for IEPs and for issues with that. If you can't afford advocates as well, the ARC is a place in Colorado Springs that I know provides advocates based off like a pay scale, so that anyone can use those services and have someone to support them and know the laws and know how to fight back when they're not being fair and they're not following through on what they've agreed on. So for you specifically, if you're currently dealing with those issues with an IEP, I would definitely reach out to the ARC, see what they can do to help you, and see if they have an advocate that can review your kid's case, and see if they have any suggestions for you. That would be my personal suggestion for you. But
All
every
right, and
single
then
one is
go ahead.
no, I was just saying every single IEP is different. All the resources are different just because, you could have two identical twins that both have autism and their IEPs are not going to be the same. They are all individualized and that's required by law. So you're going to see that.
Does that stop at the K through 12, or are there any options once they get
Not anymore. No, it does not. Colleges are there too. Colleges are required because of the Americans with Disabilities Act. They also must adhere to IDEA. There are safeguards for you under those laws. So get smart on them, figure out what they are, look for an advocate, see if you can figure out what would meet your child's needs in those situations. But as a parent with kids with special needs as well, I can tell you I would never take my IEP away. That is what guarantees them the supports that they need. And it does follow them where they are. Each school can choose to accept it or to ask for modifications to it based on what they have available and the resources they have at hand. And those agreements all should be done in a meeting and they have to be agreed upon by all parties. So those are your rights. And definitely one of the best things for any special needs parent is get to know IDEA, get to know what the laws are, get to know what the rules are. What are the rights that your child has? I'm going to go right into this because that's what I was about to talk about too. Is I'm I'm just very passionate about trying to figure out what you don't know. And a lot of times they, won't tell you that you have to ask for something in order for it to be provided. It's not just given, even though they know your kid could need it. And so I don't want you to not ask when it could be there. It could be a support that's available. And all it took was just asking for it, Um, and a lot of times you'll talk to special education teachers and things like that, and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you finally asked for that. For years, I've been wanting that for this kid. And they're not allowed to tell the parents, hey, you should ask for this and you should do this. It is something you have to know to advocate for your child. And there's a lot of things like that. There's a lot of those benefits that go unused. And so one of the best things I can tell you as a parent of a special needs kid is to understand your child's rights. Read those laws, get familiar with them, and find other parents that have been through it. Find the different nonprofits and the organizations that can help you with advocates that can really help you fight that good fight and make sure you're doing what's best for your child. And so it is not easy. I have been there and I know it is definitely not easy. I wish there was a much easier way. There just unfortunately right now it's very convoluted and it's political. It's all about budgets and like what's available, and then you've got the charter schools versus the public schools and what they do and don't have to provide. It gets so complex. And it's way above my head even in my position. Even with, 2 kids on IEPs in my own home, and what I do as a job working with kids with special needs every day. So it is not easy. And I will tell you, I commend all of you guys that are working special needs kids and that have them and you're going through this fight, because it really takes a lot. It takes a toll. It's super hard. It's not easy. And give yourselves a break and know that you're doing the best you absolutely can sometimes. But definitely don't be afraid to advocate for your child and what you think they deserve and what they need. And I think that's the best thing I can tell you when it comes to that. Sorry if that one is a little long-winded. Obviously, I'm a little passionate about it. I hate when people are told something that is just so wrong because there's things out there that are supposed to help and prevent that. So, I wish you the best of luck with that struggle.
Thank you.
The other thing, for parents with autistic children or any other disability, that your child may have, um, I talked about understanding your child's rights in depth there, but build a relationship with the school and the staff. Establish it early. Talk to that special ed teacher. Get to know them by name. Say hi to them. If you think that your kid might be on the spectrum or may need a 504 plan, if you already know their name and they already know your face, it's going to be a lot easier to start that process and get it moving. Also regularly talking to them, meeting with them, making phone calls, sending emails, it keeps everyone on the same page. And there's a lot of miscommunication and everything else that happens because normally information travels through multiple people within these school districts when we're talking about these IEPs and these 504s. So just make sure that you're doing what you can to stay in contact, stay in touch, and make sure you're doing what you can. Yeah, and I see Deborah putting some of the different advocacy groups in here too. So yeah, the peakparent.org is a great one as well. But there are resources, so keep that in mind. And you guys are in a great group that can help you find those resources, which is amazing. It's already the first step. Prepare for your meetings. If you have an IEP meeting or a 504 meeting, or even just a parent teacher conference that's coming up, go in prepared. Make sure you know, oh, here's some things that I'm looking at. Keep documentation. If you're like, no, well, I had to go pick up Johnny 6 times this last semester because of behaviors. I want to know the 6 days so that you can present that in a meeting. It's on record. Um, that shows a pattern. That shows that there is continual issue in that area, which means that supports and a plan need to be in place to help with that. And so make sure you're doing your due process, make sure you're preparing things, keeping documents, making sure you're aware of what's there. I always like to have the draft IEP before I go into an IEP meeting. And I have to tell you, I have to fight tooth and nail these days to even get that. I was just doing it this week, trying to get a draft IEP before I went into the meeting. And the school didn't even have it. And when I got into that meeting, I'm telling you, that special ed teacher didn't even have it typed up. It was all on a notebook paper. So there was no way I was getting that draft either. But no, them knowing, hey, I want this, I'm going to advocate for that, and I'm going to work for it, so that I can be the most prepared for those meetings to make them most successful. That's super important. With that, be clear about your goals and your concerns. Have incidents written down, or have ideas written down of supports that you think might be helpful. Those are all great when you're especially looking at forming or um, changing an IEP or a 504, or maybe it's up for like renewal or update in that school year. Make sure that you're changing things based on where your student is, and making sure you're looking ahead to what future problems might occur because of the problems that you've already seen. So those are all the ways that you can be prepared for that meeting and kind of walk in there to have the greatest chance at success. Know the IEP process if you are going for it. Typically, the best way I have found to do this is as soon as I make that first phone call to that special ed teacher saying I need evaluation, I need to have this reviewed for an IEP, I'm going to specifically ask them, what are the steps with your school on getting an IEP in place? What are the time frames that you expect that to be in? And at what point should I be contacting you, because I haven't seen that happen yet. Typically, those special education teachers are going to tell you right then on that phone call. And then I typically write up an email right after. I just want to clarify our conversation earlier. This is what I understand. Thank you so much for your help. I will be in contact at this point if I haven't heard from you. Typically, you're going to get a response from that email that just says, yep, it was great talking to you, or something like that. I've got it all working. But putting it in writing, even after you've made that phone call, just make sure that you have documentation to be able to present if something's not happening as it should as well. Make sure your IEP is individualized. I mean, it's an individualized education plan. It literally says it in the name, but unfortunately, a lot of schools don't do it that way. So just fight for that. Make sure that it's what your kid needs, it's appropriate goals, it's appropriate accommodations and services, that restrictions on holds and consequences, things like that are all in that plan. If your kid does have behaviors, all of those accommodations should be written down. Um, I tell people a lot, if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. And so keep that in mind when you're looking at these IEPs. They might make you promises, oh, we can do that accommodation on the side. Yeah, we don't need to put it in there. Well, if you can do that accommodation already, put it in the IEP, put it in the 504 plan. Be that pushy parent. You want it in writing, because the next year you might have a different special ed teacher and they might have a different thought on that accommodation, and that IEP is going to follow them everywhere they go. So don't be afraid to fight for it, and know that if it's not in writing, it's not guaranteed. Seek support. We talked about this a little bit already. You guys are already in a group that's there to support you. Other parents, advocacy groups, professionals. There's tons of Facebook pages and different social media pages that are all there to help each other learn. If you put a problem out there and are like, hey, what would you guys do for this? Or what's your experience with that? In this day and age, you're likely to get a lot of feedback that can really help you to know how to move forward and where to start searching. So I definitely recommend that you guys seek that support and stay up to date with what's going on and what the changes are that are coming. Whatever changes those are. Um, Stay informed, keep up with the latest research, the therapies, the educational strategies, the laws that are changing in your area, what things have been added or taken away from what's required or not. There's a lot of case law that's constantly going down with different lawsuits and things that happen with special needs kids. You are seeing some stuff in the news right now about Denver schools with high suspension rates for kids with disabilities that are on IEPs. You are going to see lawsuits and court cases that have case law that come out of that. Stay up to date on it. Know what the rights are, what was determined by the judges on what's fair and what's not, and what is covered, and by IDEA, and how they can support you in the future if you were to run into those same issues. And then be persistent. Don't hesitate to follow up on requests and ensure that anything that they said they were going to do, that they're being implemented. Delia, you were saying that you've got an IEP that they're not doing the supports that they should be. IEPs are legal documents. They are required to provide that, or to provide reasoning for why it wasn't done. They are also provided to take data. They need to make sure that they're following up, that they are providing that information as needed and as requested. So I believe that as a parent, you know your child better than anyone else. And that as a parent of special needs kids, it's our job and our responsibility to advocate for them in any way possible that we have, whether that's being educated and knowing what the laws are, or whether that's just being persistent and bugging the heck out of someone when I'm not getting a response. Sorry, I'm losing my voice now. But all of that's to be said, that your intuition is typically right on. And if something doesn't feel right, ask for some support, ask for some verification, ask for the data, see what they're saying, and then document stuff, and know what's going on, and stay in tune to it. Being proactive and informed, you just get to play a more vital role in shaping what their educational experience really is, and making sure that they're receiving the necessary supports to be successful in school. And that's super important. And there's no one else that's going to do it other than their parents. And so you guys all play in huge role in whether or not your children are successful in these classrooms and in these environments. So don't be afraid to be persistent and to advocate for them. That's really everything Jenny and I had specifically for you guys tonight, but I am definitely open to taking any questions that you guys might have, and just hearing if there's anything else we can help you guys with.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay. So my daughter has an IEP plan, and she's been in speech and OT in those plans and stuff, and I've had problems with District 20, but in general, with IEPs. So my question is when my daughter's test scores go up, even the slightest, because she has retention issues, and long story short, she's had to go through like summer school, like it was incorporated in the IEP plan that she do that. And with her scores just increasing, which is because, I do homeschooling on top of it. And, I'm very like active in her learning. They have taken that away from her. So my question is like, just because they do a little bit better, can they take that away from a child when they see it's helping? Because they tried telling me, well, she has to have a solid year of declinement in those test scores in order for us to give that back to her. Can they take those kind of things out of the IEP plan? Because it's not like she jumped off the scales, and doing good. It's because she was increasing because of the things that I'm proactively doing as a mom and trying to help her in the circumstances.
Yeah. So unfortunately, like, I don't know specifically how your daughter's IEP is written, or what the different conditions were that were written in. But I would definitely recommend reaching out to those advocacy groups. I know there's a few in here, the ARC, Peak Parent. They can help you to kind of dissect what is or is not allowed with each individual IEP. They're so nuanced, and every school is different on how they run them, and every child is different and their plans are different. So unfortunately, it would be near impossible for me to give you good advice in
Okay.
regards to that. But what I can tell you is if you're unsure and you feel like it's not right, seek some additional help and support and see what you can find out. And make
Okay.
sure that they're not doing something they shouldn't be doing. And that is
Okay.
definitely the advice I would have for you. Mhm.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. All
Well,
right. Well, oh,
I
sorry.
just wanted to say sorry. Since a couple people are asking about, help as for later for adults, I just wanted to
Mhm.
give my experience with TRE is that it is very important that if you think that your child is going to need to be on a waiver as an adult, that you start those services before they are an adult. And the reason that's
They,
important is because there's like a 10-year waiting period after they're an adult. If you are already on a waiver and you're getting services, you're kind of grandfathered in to the adult services program. If you wait and then your child's an adult, there's a 10-year waiting program till they can get services. And so I didn't know those things, and fortunately for
yeah.
me, I got in right before he became an adult, but I think
Mhm.
that's something that people need to know.
Yeah, we were recommended by our advocate for our clinic. We have a advocate that works with us through TRE, and she had actually told us that she recommends making sure you touch base with them by the time a child is 16 in regards to what might be needed for adult services, which I was blown away by. I thought, wow, that's really in advance. But she's like, yeah, it's 2 years, but some of this stuff can take 18 months just to process. And so hearing some of that, I was blown away. But I absolutely agree with you. Getting on it early, better to be early than late to the party. So make sure you're doing everything you can, get informed, use those resources. Worst case scenario, you walk into TRE and they're like, oh, you're too far ahead. We'll get that to that over here and let's schedule an appointment then. But you have to start sooner than you would think you do. Hmm. Definitely agree. All right. Well, I was a little worried we wouldn't have enough to talk about to get us all the way to 7:50, but you guys definitely got us there. And I appreciate the opportunity to share with you guys and to just give you guys some insight on autism. Um, it has been my pleasure and Jenny's pleasure to be here with you guys tonight. And I wish you all the best of luck with everything that you're dealing with and use your resources and don't be afraid to advocate for you and your children, okay?